Welcome to another episode of On Patrol with the Suffolk County PBA. I'm CJ Hutter, the treasurer of the PBA.
I'm Tanner Brendamar, the Sergeant at Arms of the PBA.
And today we have Dr. Errol Toulon joining us. He's the Suffolk County Sheriff. Thanks for joining us, Errol.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so Errol has a very interesting history. He's been involved in a lot of lines of work, right? But we want to really focus on your job as sheriff here. And growing up in the Bronx, your father was a corrections officer in New York City?
No, he was a warden. He retired as a warden.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
Now, did he have a large influence in you wanting to get involved in law enforcement and this sort of work?
Law enforcement, but I really wanted to be a New York City transit police officer. And when I was getting ready to enter their academy, New York City Corrections called me and asked my father, what should I do? Which choice should I make? And he said that if I go to corrections, at least I know who the bad guys are. So I decided to go into corrections.
That's not bad advice.
Yeah.
And, your father's always going to be, I'm sure it's a proud moment for your father going into, you going into law enforcement, but a parent's always going to worry about their kids too. So I think him kind of guiding you into the direction he was comfortable with is, great advice from a father.
Yeah. He and my mom, thankfully, they're both still here. And so they still continue to give me a lot of guidance, even in my old age.
So now, from speaking to you, we've known each other for years. It sounds like you had a great relationship with your parents growing up. And, your father had a lot of influence, not just in the line of work you went into, but also actually the line of work you went into with the Yankees, too.
Yes.
You have a history of working for the New York Yankees.
Yes. When I was a junior and senior in high school, I was a batboy for the New York Yankees during the 1979 and 1980 seasons.
That's a very unique experience. And, I could just think of some of the guys that you've probably known from your time doing that, like Hall of Famers like Goose Gossage, right? Maybe Reggie Jackson, guys that, national figures that people look to as, heroes growing up.
Yeah, the Yankees had just come off back-to-back World Series championships against the Dodgers. So when I joined the club, as I like to say affectionately,
right.
In 1979, I was like, wow, this is something from Catfish Hunter to Thurman Munson to Greg Nettles, Reggie Jackson, Willie Randolph. Billy Martin was the second manager that season because Bob Lemon started. They fired him in the middle of the season, and then Billy came back, fired Billy at the end of the 79 season, and then brought Dick Hauser in as the manager for the 1980 season.
So that's got to be a very interesting time because people hear about the Billy Martin saga with George Steinbrenner, right? And George Steinbrenner, as the owner of the Yankees, always had that reputation of being very passionate about his team, right? And he got that nickname, the Boss.
Right.
So how much effect did, say, the Boss have on you guys down in the clubhouse and being a bat boy?
So I only met Mr. Steinbrenner twice, but I can tell you when you look at the organization, the professionalism, the way he treated his employees, and not just the players, but everyone within the organization, really opened my eyes up as to a management that I didn't even think about as a young kid, but more when I became an adult and a supervisor and a manager in my respective law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I've heard you speak in the past about not just the corrections officers that work in the sheriff's office or the deputy sheriffs, but of the civilian personnel, the support staff. And you had a term that you affectionately referred to them as, I forget what it was, something along team members, or you referred to them a certain way where you made sure that they knew they were part of this team. They played a vital role in the mission the sheriff's office has. And it sounds like you may have learned that from George Steinbrenner.
Learned it from George Steinbrenner, but also my father.
Okay.
When he was a warden in the jails, he told me that every person matters because everyone that's working inside the facilities is very important to making sure the operation works properly. But when you look at Mr. Steinbrenner and looked at not only, the way he treated individuals, but more, that humanistic side, which I didn't really see when he brought back Doc Gooden and he brought Darryl Strawberry back because I wasn't with the club. But that just to show what type of person he is.
Right. He was open to giving people those second chances and to give people the opportunity to succeed.
Right. Which is very important in life. We realize that everybody's going to make a mistake. Whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're, a teacher, everyone's going to make a mistake. How bad that mistake is, depends on what we're going to do as far as, mitigating the issues. But more importantly, treat everybody with respect and as a human being.
It's a great style of management because a lot of people at work, they're just a stat or just a worker, but they treat them like a human being. That's a great way to conduct business, I think.
One of the things I do as a sheriff is if one of my employees is having an issue, one of the things I ask the staff or even the union is what's going on with that person. Is there something going on that we don't know about? Marital issues, substance abuse, financial issues, health issues, and let's deal with that first. And then we can deal with the problem at hand, unless there's just a problem, a problem employee. But, a lot of men and women just going through the day-to-day things that we all, encounter.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because as union reps, we see that side of it as well. And sometimes a guy who, let's just make a fictitious example of somebody who's been a good model productive employee for 10 years, all of a sudden they kind of fall off. Management might not know that, at home he has a wife that might be dealing with cancer treatments.
Right.
Or maybe at home they're dealing with, maybe they just had a newborn baby who's not sleeping and he's under a lot of stress at home. Maybe it's just a temporary thing that he's going to eventually get through. But it's great to hear that you as a manager can understand that, these men and women face these real life issues at home too that could affect temporarily their working conditions.
Yes. I'll bring up my father, who was on the executive board of 3 unions in the correction agency when he worked there. And I watched the way management should interact, at least with the unions. And then when he became a manager, how his interaction with the unions were. And even with staff, I think, in 36 years on the job, my father only wrote up 1 officer,
Right.
And that's a lot for 36 years. And it was pretty egregious. He's the one that liked to make an example a different way than hurt someone's pocket.
Right. And I'm glad you bring that up too, because there's often ways to come to solutions for little problems or issues in the workplace that doesn't necessarily have to hurt somebody in the pocket, right? Mm-hmm. And doesn't necessarily have to affect their family at home, because maybe hurting them in the pocket is the difference of a father being able to provide an opportunity for their daughter to play soccer or their son to play t-ball, right? So you don't have to necessarily affect the family at home, but you can get a message across and that worker can make the adjustments necessary going forward.
Right. For me, and one of the things I like to do is actually get out and speak to my staff. Not where, all right, the sheriff's walking and they have to be a certain way. And one of the first things as I approach every staff member is, how are you and your family doing?
Right.
Because that's more important to me than the job itself. We're all going to get through the job. We're going to do the job the best we can. We'll get through the day. But what's going on inside that you may need to either talk to me about, or a wellness unit or a supervisor?
I think just having that conversation with your employees, with the other sheriffs that work there is huge. I mean, it's nice to be recognized that you have other things going on in your life besides work.
Yes, some of the things that I've experienced in my life, I realize that we want to make sure that the employees are, okay, to the best of our ability. And if they need help in certain areas, whether it's our unions, and I'm very lucky, just like Suffolk County Police Department, I have, Lou Viscuzzi and Tommy Bavona, who are really actively engaged and communicate with us so that we can make sure our membership is safe.
Yeah, and Lou and Tom, Lou and Tommy are great guys. We have a great relationship with them too. All the county unions really work together in a lot of aspects when it comes to maintaining, healthcare and benefits for all county employees. So we have a great relationship with them too. So it's interesting that you bring up some of your experiences in life that kind of enlighten you to understanding that your workers, your men and women, are going through things at home too from time to time. And Tanner and I have heard you speak multiple times about some of the things you've gone through in life. But I don't think a lot of the general public understands some of the things you've had to overcome yourself,
Right.
At home with family and with your own health.
In 1996, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I had to undergo chemotherapy and radiation. And, when I was diagnosed, I thought I wasn't going to see my 2 sons graduate from grammar school. That's where they were at the time. And then 6 years later, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And that I thought was pretty much a death sentence. And I was going to be saying goodbye to everyone at that time, and let alone seeing the boys graduate from high school at that time. So, I was able to get through those illnesses through the grace of God and really a supportive family and community that I engage with. 3 years later, I had a cardiac tamponade, so I had to have a pericardial window placed in my heart. So that's 2006. And then, tragically, my first wife, we were married 29 years, passed away due to suicide. And I'm able to talk about that now. It's not something easy to talk about, but, there are many men and women that are contemplating that as a decision. And, the devastation that it leaves behind on the family, myself and my two sons, is something that I'll deal with cancer, pancreatic cancer, and everything all over again before I would want anyone to have to experience that. And so I am able to talk about it so that people can get the help they need. You're making a permanent solution to really a temporary problem when you decide to make that choice. So then, a few years later, I decided to return back to New York City as a deputy commissioner of operations, working with the correction department. And 2016, I started to butt heads with the de Blasio administration.
Understandably so.
Yeah. They wanted me to adjust the numbers where our violence was less, and not by training or policy or even technology. They just wanted me to remove numbers on a piece of paper. I refused to do that. And in January of 2017, I was asked to resign. So now I'm in my mid-50s and I'm unemployed. So I understand when individuals are having financial issues because, I can share this. I was borrowing against my 401k, went through my savings just to try and figure out how was I going to survive. Even to the point in June or July of 2017, I almost applied for a cashier job at Wendy's in St. James just to have something to do every single day. Even though I have a doctorate, I have an MBA, I was a deputy commissioner at the third largest correctional agency in the country. I'm unemployed, and what am I going to do? And so very bitter, a lot of emotions during that year. And then, last year I had skin cancer, so I had to deal with that. So, I'm very empathetic and compassionate towards the staff, trying to do a good job. But, they make a mistake because of life's issues, and probably a lot more compassionate than I would have been maybe 15 years ago as a boss.
I mean, we've come to know each other over the last couple of years. I've heard you talk a little bit about this stuff here and there, and it doesn't really sound like a story of a victimhood or a why me. It sounds like a resilient story of how you've overcome all this stuff. And quite frankly, whenever we talk to you, whenever we see you, or wherever you're out there working, you always have a smile on your face. You're always treating people with respect. I always admire that about you. I think it truly is a resilient story, and I think that other people see that and hear your story, and it affects their lives.
No, thank you. And, I in this position, I am extremely fortunate. I do not take being the sheriff for granted. I think it's probably one of the best positions I ever had, but it gives me the opportunity to not only engage and help people in our community, but support law enforcement, because it's very important for me to make sure that I can be a voice, an independent voice, not beholden to anyone but the people, and stand up for law enforcement when we're doing the right thing and we're just being attacked from the left and right.
That's so respectable, and I admire that about you.
Yeah, thank you.
And that means a lot to everybody too, because like you said, we're getting attacked in the media. It seemed like almost every day for the last decade or two, we were getting attacked by the media. And now, to have, at least here in Suffolk County, a Suffolk County Sheriff, a Suffolk County DA, Suffolk County Executive, basically the whole legislature that supports law enforcement and really wants to give us the tools we need to succeed. That means a lot to the membership. And I don't think it can be understated how valuable that is to our mental health, to know that we're supported and we'll be given the benefit of the doubt and the opportunity to explain ourselves when something maybe doesn't look pretty on camera, right? Elected politicians are not going to grandstand to try to, appease the far left wing or the far right wing, however you want to look at it.
Right.
They're going to give us the opportunity to explain ourselves. And we have that general support and trust that a lot of law enforcement don't feel in other parts of the country.
I can tell you with County Executive Romaine, District Attorney Tierney, Police Commissioner Catalina, I'm very fortunate to have that supportive group with me, because there are sometimes you just need to talk about things that we're dealing with. And, they're a base for me to actually vent. And, I look at all three as mentors in some way, shape, or form.
It seems like you guys aren't doing things for the party's sake. You're doing things for the right reasons. And I know that, like you spoke about, you wouldn't change the numbers. I know back when, 2020, 2021, when Cuomo didn't want a certain amount of people at the dinner table for Thanksgiving, you said we weren't going to go to people's houses. That takes a lot of courage to step up and say that, to go basically buck the party and do the right thing for the people.
Yeah, I almost suffered for that one. But, I even told my wife that evening, because I was getting a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails to, recuse or take down the post that we had put. And I just told my wife, I said, I guess I'm going to be a one-term sheriff because they're going to come after me. But I felt like I had to do something right for the people. And I was not going to go by what an elected official that knows nothing about law enforcement or just the community at large. I think I know Suffolk County pretty well, and I know what the community wants, and we're here to serve them and make them feel safe in every single way. And why should we subject our officers to knocking on the door because you got 11 cars in your driveway and the governor says only 10? It's not going to happen with me.
Right. And that's great to hear. And I don't think it can be understated how important it is that you went against what maybe the party wanted you to do when Cuomo was the governor, and you did what you felt the constituents and people in Suffolk County that you're here to represent and protect would have really wanted.
Yeah, it's every facet. A couple of months ago, I was driving off of 110 in Melville, and there was like 8 or 9 police cars. It was a pretty bad accident. And so I was driving myself. I got in my vehicle. I go over to the police officers, and you could see very weary, like, why is the sheriff coming over here? And all I did was, is everybody okay?
Right.
And they said, yeah, everything's fine. One of the police officers actually I play hockey with. So we started bantering about hockey, and then I went along my way. For me, it's just making sure everybody's okay. I'm not the type of guy that's rolling up on people and make sure people are doing the right thing or doing their jobs. That's why you got sergeants, lieutenants, and captains.
Right.
I'm there just to make sure everybody's okay.
Right. And I think it's really cool. Like you brought up playing for the hockey team, right? You're out there, playing hockey, having a good time, being just another one of the guys with the other people that work in the sheriff's office. Yeah.
Last night we had a game. We had a 10 o'clock game last night, and I'm in the locker room and all the guys are bantering about work. And, I'm just off to the side in my own little locker. I get out there. When I get out there, I'm 63 playing with 30-year-olds. So It's not pretty sometimes, but I love the exercise and I love the game. So, and you know what? The guys are a great group of guys, and I try to support every member in our office that's part of a team or some sort of club by attendance or making sure that we can do whatever we can for them.
Right. And I think that's another aspect that's important to the mental health of the men and women that work in your department, right? Because going to these events, participating in these events, the exercise that you get and the camaraderie that it builds, right? These are all great things that help build up and maintain the mental health that, law enforcement officers should have. Right.
You never realize that, wow, someone can play hockey or someone can play soccer or lacrosse, because we only look at them when we see them in our uniform. Right. I often tell people, we have volunteer, firefighters in our departments. We have teachers, we have coaches. So, we're more than just the men and women that wear a uniform every single day.
All right. So one of the things that I like to point out too, with the correctional system is that, we call them corrections officers and a correctional facility for a reason, right? We're there to try to serve the public, and these people who find themselves, committing crimes and leading a life of crime, we try to help them correct that behavior and become positive contributors to society. And you started the START program out here in Suffolk County. And from the outside looking in, that seems like a great program that will help these people re-enter and be reintroduced into society after serving their sentences.
We realize 85% of the men and women in our custody in Riverhead and Yaphank are returning back to our community. So why not try and help them be better people while they're incarcerated to return back? Now, the 15% that are going to state prison, goodbye, good luck, hope we never see you again.
Right.
But that 85% that will be in front of you, behind you, at a Target, at a Walmart, at a Stop and Shop that you wouldn't even know just was released from our facilities, we want to make sure that they have the support so that they don't reoffend or they don't even think about it. And we're not only helping them, we're helping their family members and their children. And, I'm proud to say that with our START program, it has not cost the taxpayers any additional money. We were able to move pieces of the puzzle around to create this program, and it's been pretty effective.
I don't assume it actually saves the public money. If people are being rehabilitated the right way, they're not going back into the prison system.
Right. They're not going to commit a crime when you're going to your car at the mall. Your car is not going to be broken into while it's in the driveway of your home. Those that have substance abuse issues or mental health are going to know where the services are in the communities they're returning back to.
So what kind of training or what kind of, things do you expose these prisoners or inmates to as far as being able to reintroduce them to society? Because I've heard stories of like job training, or even I didn't realize it till Lou Viscusi came on, but he had mentioned teaching these people how to even be, mothers and fathers, right? So that they could properly look after babies that they have at home. Right.
So we have resume building, parenting skills, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, solar. These are organizations that come in.
Basically trades.
Exactly. And also carpentry, landscaping, small engine repair are a few
That's great.
that we name. And what more importantly is that someone can say, to a prospective employer when they release that I made a mistake, but while I was incarcerated, I took these programs inside the facility, and we've identified about 70 employers that will give second chances to formerly incarcerated individuals. And so we're able to connect them with employment after they leave our custody.
I think that's a huge thing, though, because generally I feel like a lot of crimes are committed because of alcohol, drugs, and also a lot of times when people can't hold a job or they don't have income coming in consistently, they commit more crimes. That's huge.
Right. So we also, we'll while they're in our custody, we'll help them get their birth certificates or their ID cards, prepare them for that reentry process back into our community.
And they can use this program after they leave too, right? It's for former members?
Right. So so this is interesting. So even if you left our custody a year and a half ago and you're having issues, you could reach out to our offices. But not only do we help those that have been released from Riverhead and Yaphank, anyone that's been involved in the criminal justice system can also seek our assistance. And also, if you are out of state, we will help you. If you are out of state now reside in Suffolk, we will then assist you in any services you may need.
Is there like a guidance program? Do they just reach out to the office and somebody helps them, or is there like somebody there that can kind of like push them in the right direction? How does that part work?
So what they can do normally is they'll reach out to various community leaders who we've really been in contact with, so that they can refer them to us, or they can reach out directly to our START program. The number and information is on our website.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. And I never knew the aspect of, a Suffolk County resident who may have been incarcerated out of state being eligible for this program. I never knew that. And it makes perfect sense, because now you're building up these new neighbors of ours, and you're helping these people contribute positively to Suffolk County.
Yeah, and it's very important for us to look at them so that we can not only address their issues, but, when someone's incarcerated, who's suffering? The spouse and the children. So that's why we've created some programs with some service providers in our community to assist them, connecting them to Department of Labor or Social Services, someone directly, not just here's a number and call and they'll help you. We want to connect them directly to a person at one of those two agencies, or even ECLI or EOC. And then more importantly is the children. Children coming to visit individuals that are in our custody. We don't want them to think that the generational impact of incarceration, and this is it's okay for me to visit a loved one in jail. So we will definitely, we have worked on photography programs with our youth, and I've been out 1 to 2 schools per week since becoming sheriff, talking to students about bullying, vaping, opioids, and gangs.
Right, trying to get them before they kind of enter into that lifestyle.
Great segue, because when you leave my Yaphank facility, there's a sign that says Sheriff Toulon's goal is to get to the kids before they get to me, meaning the 4 walls of Riverhead or Yaphank.
Right.
You speak about the youth, though. I know you also have a rehabilitatory pod program for the older generation in prison that kind of separates them?
Yes, we created a program for those that were 55 and older because we realized that, I have 3 individuals right now over the age of 70 in my custody. So a 70-year-old with a 19-year-old in the same housing area, 2 different mindsets, life experiences, and one has just really been downtrodden in their life. The other one is just full of energy. And, we've seen some bad fights occur between those 2 populations. And we wanted to bring in the Department of Aging from Suffolk County and some other services that can directly help these individuals. Because somebody that's 70 years of age in jail, it's not their first time.
Right. And if you could separate that 19-year-old who maybe it is his first time, maybe he's not seeing like these guys that are, perpetual offenders, guys that are in and out, the recidivists, right? Maybe you could get to them, especially with the START program, and say, you know what, this is your one time in here. Why don't you, learn how to become a mechanic, learn how to become a carpenter. Right. You could still build this positive life. You're 19, you're a teenager.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's something, and this is why I know that the program is a success. So the national recidivism rate for those that are returning back to jail after 3 years is over 60%. It's over 40% in New York State, but those participating in our START resource program is between 17 to 20%.
Oh, that's
now,
great.
it's not mandated by myself or the courts. It's voluntary by those that are incarcerated. But we are seeing a high success rate of those not coming back to jail because they know that there's supportive services when they are released and they're not by themselves.
Do the other inmates see that the success of other people and then they say to themselves, hey, like I would like to get involved in this program? Or how's that?
Yes. Well, not only that, our staff, every person that comes in our custody, our START resource staff interviews. So they all know about the program. But as I walk through the jails and I'll talk to the incarcerated individuals, as they tell me, I'm like, well, what's going on in your life? And they'll say, well, I'm getting discharged in 3 months. I'll say, well, have you spoke to our START officers? And, really, when I walk through the jails, there's usually a nice little congregation of those that want to say either positive or just complain about, the conditions. But that's just the way it is.
Right. Now, with the START program, are there success stories that come back and try to mentor some of the current inmates? Are there people that say, you know what, I was here 3 years ago, I learned how to become a mechanic, and now I've been working at, Joe's Auto Body for the last 2 years. Like I've been able to use this training to live a good life out in the real world.
Sometimes we really want to make sure that person is successful. We have had individuals that have participated, did very well in the START program, first 6 months, a year, doing very well, and then they fall back.
Okay.
So, we really want to, we'll take someone that has really been away from our facilities or even a state prison for quite some time before we can consider them as a role model or mentor to come in and talk to those that are currently incarcerated.
So it has to be sustained is what you're saying.
Correct.
Right, which is a great approach because it's good for them to be able to see that this is achievable, right? Because if say it was somebody who's only been out for 2 years, they come and say how great this is, and then they're back in 6 months.
Correct.
It loses its credibility.
Right.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've spoken about recently with Kevin Catalina, who used to work with you in the sheriff's office, is how you guys have been developing and sharing so much information and intelligence to help, because a lot of times in the jails, right, when they're arrested out on the street, these gang members, they go to the jails.
Right.
So sometimes these gang members are, talking, and there might be some sort of intelligence gained by your investigators in the jails. And that's coming back to us so we could implement this intelligence and use it out on the street to get bad actors locked up.
Right. We have first of all, a fantastic working relationship with our intel section and also, SCPD and also the DA's office. But, Kevin worked in counterterrorism when he was with NYPD, and also oversaw the 5 boroughs with the gang divisions when he was a deputy chief there. So I was a deputy commissioner, he was a deputy chief. We worked very closely in New York City. And then I was fortunate to have him come on board. And really, he is one of the people that helped me transform the sheriff's office, not only with the professionalism, but with the ideas of us being a forward-thinking agency. So what we did was we created a corrections intelligence center. And right now, we are the hub for jails and prisons across the United States to share information.
Wow.
Oregon needs information. They'll put in a request through us. We send it out to all of our partners. So not only do we have about 170 partners right now, where we meet virtually, of course, if they're out of state, we actually have 7 seats in our center for those between Westchester, New York City, Nassau, state corrections, and a couple of federal agencies that, not ICE. So that's only because of a lawsuit that we're faced with right now.
We are, yes.
But, more importantly, how do we share this information with you to help solve a crime or prevent a crime? So of those agencies that we partner with, we also have 7 international partners from Ireland to Australia to Canada, Puerto Rico, El Salvador, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, to name a few. And, it's very interesting because I went to El Salvador in 2018, and then Kevin and I, Police Commissioner Catalina, went in 2023. Totally different. I know I'm jumping off topic.
No, this is great. It's great.
I'm sorry about that, but those information and being the boots on the ground to understand what's going on in El Salvador is something that was, I think, very critical for me to understand how we can approach the gang-related issues. So, are just going back now, because I'm that type of guy, just jump all over the place. With our Corrections Intelligence Center, we've been able to stop fentanyl introductions inside of our jail. People are spraying fentanyl on books, pages in the book. When the inmate would receive the book, they would rip it out, rip it up into smaller papers, sell it through cash apps, because there's at least there's not supposed to be any money in our jails. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, that's how they would get their high. So we stopped individuals from bringing books in on the visits and went through Amazon. And then, of course, Amazon has a third-party provider. And we saw $25 books being sold for $250, $300 books. And then we realized that there was something more to this. And so we realized that was another way for contraband introduction. So now we only accept strictly through Amazon. So, it's really just another way that we can share in the jail prison community, different things that are going on. And then also as we get more information, because, I think our staff does really good interviews with individuals who are incarcerated, developing confidential informants, because we have them for longer periods of time, and we can work them to get information out of them.
Isn't it amazing how these criminals can figure out all these new ways to introduce whatever product they want to whatever customer base they want, right? So to be able to use those third parties on Amazon to sell a book for $250, that's mind-boggling to me. Like, for them to be able to think this through and come up with that kind of scam and plan, like,
it's very resourceful.
Yeah, it's resourceful, and it does show a level of intelligence. Like, if they just applied themselves somewhere else, they probably could be, positive contributors to society and live a normal life out in public.
If they did focus that in a positive way, I've seen the artistry, some of them with their drawings when I was a young correctional officer on Rikers Island. I remember, we were doing a search, and I found this individual had a bar of soap and perfectly carved Jesus on a cross, on a crucifix, with the rosary beads hanging down, in this bar of soap. And I'm like, this guy has a talent that, not too many people have, and could use it in a positive way if he chose to do so.
Right. Wow, that's incredible to me.
Yeah.
So now, do you see guys using like the START program who already have a talent, like this artist, use the START program for their resume building and being able to find a job in the line of work that they may naturally already be good at and have skills at?
Some do, but then most of them are really just going into that low-level entry position.
Okay.
Just to really start and get a footing into paying taxes, working every single day. And the grind, listen, all of us at some point in our lives, we're doing a job we just didn't want to do.
Right.
But it actually gave us a base to get to where we wanted to be.
Right. No, absolutely.
You have to start somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, you do have to start somewhere. You enter the workforce at some point, whether you're in high school or college or right after college. At some point, you're entering the workforce, and it's not necessarily where you want to end your career, but it gives you that baseline.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No.
Go on.
No, it's just, very important for us to really make sure that we can ensure some sort of productive lifestyle out of these individuals and not just leave them in their cell and forget about them, offering these various services more targeted and specific to try and help them be accomplished when they leave our custody. The interesting thing about the STAR program, too, is that when they are discharged, we will provide through donations, clothing. So even if they have left us and they need a business attire, or if they were arrested in July and now it's January when they're being discharged and they don't have the appropriate clothing, they can have the clothing at least to get to a safe location. We also provide through donations 2 weeks of non-perishable foods and also a week to 10 days of personal hygiene items, so that it's pretty much like a little starter kit for them. We have computers that they can use for resume building and also job searches.
That's great. So you're giving them at least whatever tools possible within your toolbox to give them the opportunity to succeed once they're out.
They're not just starting behind the eight ball. You're giving them kind of an opportunity to ease themselves back in, take some of the stress off what they have to do to get themselves straight and ready to go back out there.
Yeah, and that's what we're hoping between the STAR program and also our mental health and substance abuse initiatives that we have inside our facility. We're hoping that it can help individuals.
Right. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about that trip to El Salvador, because I remember when you and Commissioner Catalina did that trip, it garnered a lot of headlines, right? Because we've been battling this MS-13 scourge in Suffolk County for a decade, right? And a lot of those MS-13 gang members might come from El Salvador.
So I went in 2018, April, and by April, there were 87 law enforcement people killed. Think about 4 months, 87. Right. And when I went into the jails, they would not let me inside the jail. They let me into this big control center where it looked almost like a movie. That's how horrific it was. I didn't wear my uniform. The country was strife with corruption, and also MS-13 controlled it. I went to a unclassified meeting with several of our federal partners that were in El Salvador. And I was told that there was a beverage company that paid $1.3 million to El Salvador to actually make sure that their products could be delivered. So they weren't killing the drivers, nor were they damaging their products. And, and the interesting thing is almost like what we saw here in the organized crime, right, especially with the mafia, because the children of these high-level gang are becoming doctors, they're becoming entrepreneurs, they're becoming attorneys in El Salvador. So now you fast forward to 2023 when Kevin and I went. 2023 September. They had built this new jail called CCOT. And CCOT was only for high-level MS-13 and 18th Street. And I do believe that me and PC Catalina were the first two Americans to enter this facility. So 42 cells. And everybody says, well, it's only 42 cells. 21 on each side, but 60 to 70 people per cell.
Wow.
There are no mattresses on their bunks. They can only wear their underwear and undershirts. There was no shower area. There was a bathing area. There were 2 toilets, no visiting, no commissary, no phone calls, no mail.
Wow.
And as we toured the facility, we ran into 2 individuals that were actually from Suffolk County. They were deported from Suffolk County back to El Salvador. So it's a very tough place. Mm-hmm. Within a mile and a half of the jail, all cell phone coverage stops because of the corruption, between cell phones being smuggled inside the facility. There was a prostitution, food, that was being brought into the facilities for some of these high-level gang members. But you can tell that the president definitely has a handle. One of the things that he did was he combined the military with the police department,
Okay.
with the police force. And every MS-13 member that's arrested on the street is convicted of being a terrorist. And so with that, they're guilty of the crimes that that gang has committed.
Wow, interesting.
So that's why they're able to do that. He also has the supermajority in their legislature or Congress. So he's able to pass these laws because every 30 days is supposed to be reviewed. But it's been going on now for almost 3 years.
Interesting. And I think President Trump just did something similar where he named MS-13 as a terrorist organization here.
You know, and they are.
Yeah.
You know, there's no doubt about it. The crimes that they're accused of or the crimes that they're committing are horrific. And, you know, they are our enemy.
Right.
The president over there is Nayib Bukele, correct?
Correct.
He's very forward thinking over there. That's a very different concept. I know El Salvador is always a very dangerous country, like you said, but that's very interesting, those things you said.
And the president's changed from your first trip to your second trip, and you saw a change in policy and how everything was handled with crime.
Oh, absolutely. You know, we were able to, myself and Catalina, were able to walk throughout the countryside. In the evenings, I should say in our uniforms. We were in our sheriff uniforms. But in the evening when we would change, of course, and then go out to dinner, you can just see we're out to dinner at 9, 10 o'clock at night in El Salvador with no issues. And we were able to talk. I remember we were at a restaurant and we were talking to a couple that was next to us at another table. And they were able to understand and speak English. And they were so happy with the way the country was being run.
That's
great. You know,
great.
there's like a 96% approval rating, which is really unheard of, especially here in the States. But, you know, now tourism is now back. We got so much swag. Yeah, listen, we got so much swag. We didn't have room in our luggage. So we went to a Sears in a mall in El Salvador.
Wow.
It was absolutely beautiful. There was two people playing a violin. When you walked into, if you close your eyes and just listen, you would not think that you were in El Salvador. You really, you know, thought maybe you were in a mall somewhere in the United States.
Wow. So being tough on crime there worked, right? It worked to clean up the country.
Absolutely. And you know what? He had to take a drastic measure.
Right.
He had to go, he couldn't go into the middle. He had to go to the extreme to really make sure that the country was safe because of not only the reputation, but also the horrificness of what MS-13 and 18th Street, to, you know, their rival gang, to some point was doing there. So, you know, it has really made a tremendous difference. Surfing, it's just a beautiful, beautiful country to visit.
Good for him and good for the country, though, because I think that if somebody just hears that one piece of what you just said of how the prisoners are being treated in that prison, they might think, oh, well, that's so inhumane. But a lot of these people in MS-13 have killed so many people, and they do it ruthlessly, too. The fact that he had the courage to go to that extreme to take care of that issue, and the citizens, the everyday people that are working there and doing the right thing feel safe, that's huge.
Right. And it's a prime example of how consequences become a true deterrent to people committing crime.
Right. And they do have 6 or 7 other jails that they do support rehabilitative services. But this jail was specifically built, you know, it was built in 9 months with $130 million, and all concrete production in El Salvador stopped while they were building this jail. So they were very serious in undertaking this mission. But more importantly, they do have other facilities that work for those that have, you know, that are going back into their communities for rehabilitation.
Right. This is more for those real, you know, lifelong criminals, the real terrorists to their society, the MS-13 members, the gang members, the people that were turning that government into the corrupt government that it was a decade ago.
Right. And, you know, I asked the warden of the facility about any civil liberties, and he said people do complain, but he pointed to one specific guy, and he goes, you know what that guy was doing? And I said, no. He goes, he was kicking someone's head around like it was a soccer ball. So it was decapitated, and he's kicking it around in some field in El Salvador.
Wow, it's incredible. Some of these people are monsters, and they deserve to be treated as such.
Correct. And that's why here in the States is very important for us. You know, I know we work hand in hand together, Sheriff's Office and the police department, to really combat youth recruitment into the gangs, which is very important. And so it really takes collaboratively from the law enforcement community to work to try and save these young kids.
Right. And I'm glad you bring that up because I've read stories of some of these MS-13 gang members that are basically, they become almost like professional prisoners. And when they're locked up for extended periods of time, they become recruiters in the jails for these gangs.
Right. Recruiters in the jails and recruiters in the community because,
Right.
Just like all the other gangs, as we all know, the young kids aren't going to go to jail.
Right.
So they can commit a crime and they're going to be back out quicker than anyone would have thought. So these high-level gang members or even mid-level can use these kids to do acts that are violent and horrific that an adult would be sentenced to a more severe severe penalty.
Yeah.
Right. And the kids see it as, oh, this guy just, did whatever, committed an armed robbery and he's back out. And here he is 2 days later.
Right.
They see that there's no consequences for doing it. So it becomes incentivizing. Like, all right, maybe I can get away with making a quick $1,000, quick $3,000. There need to be consequences for the actions. There has to be true deterrence for these people entering this lifestyle.
It's interesting that you brought that up too, that they're paying attention to basically like the raise the age and the criminal bail reform that they pay attention to that stuff.
Right. And they know it better than us sometimes.
Yeah, they're very savvy with
this. Because they do have their attorneys that do, work for them. And unfortunately, it really hinders our job and makes it more frustrating when a police officer, arrests someone and by the time their tour is over, that person is now back on the corner.
Right. Yeah, it is frustrating because I remember being a patrol cop in the 7th Precinct and we'd arrest people. And I swear this happened to me when I was working. We arrest somebody for a theft. They're released out on a desk appearance ticket where they have a later court date or a field appearance ticket. And they're arrested again for doing another theft before the police officers that were involved in processing the first theft are even done.
Right.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's very, I wish Albany would at least consider speaking to law enforcement. It doesn't have to be me, but a representative of law enforcement before they look to enact some sort of legislation.
Right.
Just so they can understand from our point of view what's going on. Instead, I don't know who they speak to, but it's really not working well for our community. And it's unsafe. I mean, every day we hear about horrific crimes, multiple repeat offenders that are committing these crimes. And it's chaotic. Luckily in Suffolk County, we have great support, not only from our community, but
we do.
Our elected officials in the legislature. And I feel very fortunate to have, between Tierney, Catalina, and, County Executive Romaine with me, as we battle this to keep Suffolk safe.
And that's on both sides of the fence. The Republicans and the Democrats, the conservatives, they all work very well and have the same mindset when it comes to public safety and law enforcement.
Yeah, I think everybody's very cognizant of their job being constituent services, right? We're here to represent the people that live here. We want to make sure that we can maintain the standard of living that they've grown accustomed to,
correct,
or that they came out here to have for their families.
Right. And I do agree, all of our agencies, we want to work to help people. But if you're a bad person, we're definitely going to go out and kick your...
Right. 100%. 100%. There has to be a real deterrent to the crime. So we touched on it a little bit before. You had mentioned the lawsuit that's going on with Suffolk County, right? Because of our cooperation with, immigration enforcement during Trump's first administration.
Right.
And there was a lawsuit during the Biden administration where we ended up getting sued for $60 million.
Right.
And the federal government did not indemnify us for it, even though we were doing what the prior administration's federal government wanted us to do. Right. Have you gotten any insight or any idea of how that court case is going, or any ideas of how we might address illegal immigration or inmates that have illegal immigration status going forward into the future once this court case is over? Or do you kind of just have to wait to see how it plays out?
We really have to wait to see how it plays out because unfortunately, when the original court case was judged, it was Suffolk County and ICE. ICE was then dropped from the lawsuit. Now Suffolk County residents are now almost fit to hold a $60 million bill. But luckily, County Executive Romaine decided to appeal, and we're going to fight. When I started in 2018, I continued honoring administrative warrants, which meant, we would hold for someone up to 48 hours if their local case was adjudicated. But late in 2018, the judge ruled that was unconstitutional and illegal. So we don't do that and can't do that anymore. So we really have to wait to see what happens with the court case before we can sit down with the county attorney, the county executive, and of course the police department,
Right.
the DA, and just figure out, how are we going to address this issue here in Suffolk County.
Right. And, I personally, as a Suffolk County resident, believe that if somebody has a legal immigration status and they're out there committing robberies and burglaries and they're locked up, I think they should be deported. I think, hopefully this court case plays out in a way where we can cooperate with deporting these bad actors. And I'm not talking about going out into the communities and just randomly picking up people. I'm talking about the people that are convicted of crimes, the true bad actors.
I agree 100%. And, that's why when I came out against bail reform, again, feeling the ire of my party,
right.
because.
But doing what was right.
And, when I saw the type of individuals that were being released from my facilities back into the community, to me, it was like a no-brainer, and could not understand why we would even do something like this. Sexual obscene performance of a child, another guy, attempted strangulation of his wife. Why should they think about the victims?
Right, exactly.
No one is considering the victims of these crimes. So now this poor woman is scared because her ex-husband or husband is now back in the community because of some law.
Right. So a law that was not thought out properly.
Right.
And who, we try to preach all the time, just keep open lines of communication with us, right? If you're thinking about some sort of bill involving healthcare, you consult with doctors. If you're thinking about some sort of bill involving education, you'll consult with teachers.
Correct.
If it has to do with law enforcement, consult the cops.
Right.
Consult the sheriffs. Right. The sheriffs are elected by the constituents to be the lead law enforcement agent of the county. Right. So they should be consulting with you.
How about the victims, though?
Right.
Everybody forgets about the victims.
Right. And I think that's the perspective that a sheriff would bring when they're talking to the state assembly, the state senate about a potential bill, and the governor when it comes to signing it. So those open lines of communication can't be understated how valuable they are.
Yeah. We're fortunate. Some of the state elected officials here are very engaged with us to actually
I agree.
Find out what's going on, before a bill. I know whether it's Jody Giglio or Steve Stern, always, two people I could think of that are going to say, this bill is they're looking to pass this bill. What do you think about it? And so, it's helpful for me to understand how it can impact us, but more importantly, what's best for the community.
Right. Exactly. And we give credit where credit is due all the time. Our local electeds on both sides of the aisle do maintain those open lines of communication with us. It's unfortunate that the state has gotten to a point where it seems like the policies of New York City end up running Albany as well.
Yes, I agree 100%. And, I will continue to be a voice to fight back and push back on anything that I think is not going to keep our law enforcement staff safe, or more importantly, our communities.
Yeah. Errol, we appreciate that. We appreciate everything we've spoken about here today. We know we have an ally in you in law enforcement. I'm happy as a Suffolk County resident to have you as the sheriff here.
Thank you.
I think it's great for my family to be able to have people in positions that are really looking out for our well-being and maintaining that standard of living that my grandparents moved out here for and that my parents had as kids, what I had as a kid. I want that for my children. Oh. So I thank you for everything you're doing. One more thing I want to hit on before we close up is you have a lot of great stories about your time with the Yankees. And I want to focus, I want the public to understand, like, some of the interactions you had with these players, some of the fun times you had with the Yankees. Would you mind sharing one of the stories with the public out there about your experience working with the Yankees as a bat boy?
Sure. So April 1979.
He was quick with it.
Yeah.
He was ready with this
story too.
I was hoping, because I was going to see if there's anything else you want to say.
Yeah, here we go.
End with a Yankee story, but more. So April 79, day before. We're getting ready to play opening day against the Milwaukee Brewers. And I'm in the clubhouse for the first time. When you walk into the Yankee clubhouse back then, Reggie Jackson had the corner locker on the left-hand side. Nettles had the corner locker on the right-hand side. The last locker on the left before you went into the training room was Thurman Munson, and the last locker on the right-hand side before you went to the players' lounge was Jim Catfish Hunter. So I'm in there. I was attending Cardinal Hayes High School, not a uniform, but we had to wear jacket and tie. And I meet Pete Sheehy, who was a clubhouse guy during Gehrig and Ruth and Berra, DiMaggio, and Nick Priori, who's the assistant clubhouse guy. And they're showing me my responsibilities for the next day. And who walks into the clubhouse? Jim Catfish Hunter, right? So I'm thinking, the Oakland A's and, this is just the guy. So he walks in. So I go over to Nick, assistant clubhouse guy. I go, Nick, can I get Catfish's autograph? He goes, yeah. He goes, go in the ball bag, get a clean ball. Here's a pen because they weren't using Sharpies back then. Mm-hmm. And just go up to him and ask him. So I go up to him. I go, excuse me, Mr. Hunter. My name's Errol Toulon Jr. I'm going to be a bat boy here this season. Can you autograph this ball to my parents? So he goes, sure. What's their name? Autographs the ball, and my heart is just pounding. So he gives me the ball back. I said, thank you very much, sir. I turn around and start to take like 3 steps, and he says, hey, kid. And I'm like, oh, what the hell did I do? I turn around and go, yes, sir. He goes, by the way, the name is Catfish to you, not Mr. Hunter. And
that's great.
Right then and there, I felt like I was part of the team. So, I mean, hopefully I can come back on. I'll fill your whole hour up full of Yankee
I would love
stories.
that. I would love that.
It was just great being in that clubhouse, running down the runway, hopping those 4 steps into the dugout, and 4 more steps and you're on the field, having a catch. Sometimes being able to take batting practice, on the field is just really a great experience.
That is such a cool experience. Are there any former players that you still keep in touch with? Anybody that you're still personal friends with?
No, everybody has moved on through actually Ray Negron.
Yeah,
John Eric Negron's.
Has John Eric.
Yeah, Ray's a great guy. I just saw him recently.
Yeah, he's a sergeant with you guys.
Yeah.
Ray has brought me back to the stadium a few times. So, I'm very fortunate to have that relationship with the New York Yankees and Randy Levine and Hal Steinbrenner.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
And I would definitely love to have you on again just to talk about Yankee stories because I think that's great and very interesting for the viewers.
Maybe we can do it during the playoff run.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. Awesome.
We got the Yankees to get you to throw out the first pitch or something.
Yeah, I threw out the first pitch at Citi Field once. So now I got to see if I can get there.
You just did at Fairfield Properties with us, right?
Yes,
2 weeks ago. Right. And that was a fun day too. Everyone went out there, he threw a perfect strike for the first pitch. Right, he's painting the corners like Greg Maddux.
Thank you for having me too.
We appreciate it, Errol. We thank you for everything you do, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you guys. God bless you both.
Thanks, Errol.
Okay.
You too.
All right.